William Jennings Bryan, in a famous speech, said that destiny is not a matter of chance, it's a matter of choices. It's not a thing to be waited for, it's a thing to be achieved. And in today's session, I'm going to be talking about the importance and the difference in betting on odds as opposed to betting on luck. In many ways, we've come to believe that in some way our lives is shaped and formed by luck, destiny, chances. And for that reason, we often take a somewhat passive approach to how we live, which unfortunately is rather sad. And the reason being that we only get one shot, we only get time. And the time we get every day, 24 hours, is all we're ever going to get. There's a time and a place to be patient. There's a time and a place to be aggressive. I heard someone once say that to be successful in a particular niche area, all you need is timing, aggressiveness, and skill. And he said, well, at the right time, all you need to do is be aggressive. You don't need much skill. And that is another way of saying you have to take advantage of opportunities. You have to take advantage of whatever comes your way. You can't wait. When things don't go your way, you can't say it's good luck or bad luck or no luck or dumb luck, whatever you want to call it. You have to ask yourself the question, what can I do to change the odds? Now, growing up, I studied a particular subject called probability theories. Very difficult, in my opinion, very boring subject. It's quite linked to statistics, but it's very interesting in its own unique way. If you have a passion for it, you find it interesting. If you don't, you find it a little bit boring like I did. But in probability theories, one of the things we learned is that there is a probability linked to every outcome. And in many ways, you and I can influence the outcome if we can influence the probabilities in all walks of life, business, your social life, your financial life. There is a probability of achieving the results you want. But there is a pattern, there's a process you have to follow to be able to influence and change the probability. So you might hear, for example, that the probability of someone graduating from a particular district, maybe high school, is say 20%. Well, many people have sacrificed their destinies. They've sacrificed their dreams and goals and visions. They've sacrificed their desires simply because of a statistical statistics or statistical representation made by someone else. So someone might come to you and say, well, this particular group of people, I'm not going to use a particular group because I don't want to stereotype, or I don't want to use or play the identity card here. Some might say, if you fall into this group of people, the chances of you making it true or making it past is 10%. Most people take that information and they make it their belief. They make it their new self-identity. They use that to form their self-image. So they say, why even try? If this particular university would only accept 10 out of 1,000 applicants, if this particular company would only accept 2 out of 500 applicants, why even try? If this particular person that I'm trying to form a relationship with will not even give me a chance, why even try? If there are a lot of people interested, why try? We decide subconsciously, but influenced by our conscious mind, to not try. In many ways, we get to the point and we say, you know what, let's just see what happens. If it's meant to be, it will be. In my opinion, one of the most stupid statements anyone can make is, if it was meant to be, it will be. It's such a shallow and defeated statement. What you're effectively saying is, I don't play a part. I don't get to influence the odds. I don't get to change the course of history. Now, I'll tell you this. Nelson Mandela changed the course of history. Martin Luther King changed the course of history. Steve Jobs changed history he influenced, he affected history. Mahatma Gandhi influenced, affected history. Oprah Winfrey influenced, affected history. Now, I can make you one promise. If you go and study all these names that I've mentioned, you find something remarkable about their lives. They didn't hold on to chances. They didn't believe in luck. They made choices. They made decisions. So you see, the quality of your life and my life is really going to come down to our ability to make the right decisions and choices in such a way that we influence the odds. So I would say this: if you're going to make bets, never make bets on chances. You might be thinking, I want to play the lottery this weekend, or I'm going to play the lottery tonight. Well, first question you should ask yourself is not what is the payout or the winning prize. It could be 60 million, it could be 100 million. Most people focus on the wrong number. That's not what you should focus on. You might be thinking, well, I'm only paying £1 and I get the chance, the word is coming again, chance, to win 500 million or 100 million. You're focusing on the wrong number. The right question should be, what are the odds of me beating the bookmaker? In other words, what is the probability of me beating the bookmaker? Now, to answer that question, you simply have to ask yourself, in the past, previously, in the last draw, how many people were successful? If you ask that question, you'll come up with a number, a statistical number. With that number, you can look at the number and ask yourself a question. What are the possibilities? Or is it probable that I can influence and change the odds? So I would say the question about betting on chance and luck, take it out from your vocabulary. Take it away from your vocabulary. Replace that luck, chance, with odds. The reason being, once you have odds, you have what I call a mathematical number, a representation, and that you can influence. Now, how do you influence odds? Well, I'm going to give you about 3 or 4 different ways in which you can do this. And I'm going to explain each way using the universal law to make it a little bit more interesting, but to make it a little bit more memorable. Odds are simply probabilities. Probabilities based on information, based on historical patterns, based on what I might consider to be, we have people who are economists. They study the past. They analyze, in principle, what's going on in the present. They extrapolate part of the past and the immediate present to make predictions about the next future, the immediate present future. How can you influence odds? Well, to influence odds, let me give you 3 or 4 different laws, universal laws. The first is, and actually, let me backtrack. I think I'm going to share something with you that will make it a little bit more interesting. If you study the life of Thomas Edison, Thomas Edison was quite remarkable. On one occasion, legend has it that he had tried an experiment, and he had done it more than 9,999 times. Now, there are different accounts of this story. It doesn't really matter what the number was. The point was he had done it so many times, but he had failed. On this particular occasion, he tried again, and on his 10,000th attempt, he succeeded. Now, for my study, I found out that he was asked in a rather rude way, because he was trying to create this incandescent light bulb, and in his laboratory, he was there with a friend, and he created an explosion, and it wasn't planned, a sudden explosion that almost blew up the whole laboratory space. His friend got angry and said, "When are you going to give up on this particular trial? You know, you could have killed us here. When are you going to give up?" And he said, the friend said to him, You failed 9,999 times. When are you going to give up?" And he said, "I haven't failed. I've just discovered another way in which it will not work. As a matter of fact, I've just discovered how to make an explosive." Now, here was the point. When he started his attempt, I think in his mind, he must have said, "Has anyone done this before?" The answer may have been no. Okay, what are the odds? Well, 0 to 1. Great. To him, he might have said, "You know what, I'm going to do this until I get to a point where I can influence the odds. Every time I make an attempt, I'm going to study what I did right, what I did wrong. I'm going to make improvements. So what he's was trying to do was influence the probability of success. Michael Jordan, remarkable athlete, he said in one of his famous statements, he said, I believe he said, I've played more than 300 games. He said 26 times I've been given the opportunity to take the game-winning shot, and I failed. He said, I failed over and over and over again, and that is why I succeed. Such a profound statement. But if you study his life and history, one of the things you find out is Michael Jordan was so exceptional simply because he was, at a young age, he started trying to influence and change the odds. Now, this leads me into the first law that I'm going to talk about. And this is something called the law of averages. In statistics, it's called the law of large numbers. It simply means that if you do something over and over again, if there is an experiment or if there's something you're trying to attempt, let's say you want to learn how to play basketball and you're trying to do free throws. If you do it once for the first time, you may not score. If you do it twice, you may not score. If you do it 3 times, you may not score. But the more you do it and you course correct, now I must remember this, constant, never-ending growth and improvement. You must take the feedback, ask yourself the question, what could I have done differently? So you must constantly improve your performance. If you keep throwing the free throws and improving, someday, now it could be on your 10th attempt, it could be on your 100th, it could be on your 1001, I don't know. But someday, the law of large numbers or the law of averages will kick in. At some point, you will start to get better. So you might do 1,000 and you get 1. You do another 1,000, maybe this time you get 2. You do another 1,000, maybe this time you get 4. What's happening here? You're growing, you're improving. So if you want to improve the odds of success or doing better in any area of life, just apply the law of averages. Simply saying, if I do something often enough, if I do it with intention, if I do it with excellence, if I do it with focus, if I try and improve every attempt, then at some point, the law of averages will kick in. And as a result of what I'm doing, what I'm attempting, I might find that I can influence and slightly shift the odds to my favor. Rather than saying, I'm just going to stand and throw the ball, and if it goes in, great. If it doesn't go in, well, that was just luck. You're going to simply say, no, I'm the master of my ship. I'm the captain of my ship. I'm the master of my own life. I'm going to change the odds. I'm going to try. Life is something to be achieved, not something to be waited for on. Number 2 is quite tied to number 1. It's the law of sowing and reaping. The law of sowing and reaping simply says that if you sow, you will reap. As a matter of fact, the fable, the parable of this law talks about a farmer who goes out to sow seed, and he scatters his seed. Some seed fall on good ground. Some seeds fall on the rocky ground. Some seeds fall amongst the thorns. Some seeds fall amongst the soil where the soil is quite shallow. And the story says that in each of those areas where the seed falls, the results were different. On the rocky ground, it says the sun came out and scorched the seed, meaning the seed died because there was no soil. When it fell on the soil with very shallow soil, he said that the seed started to grow, but because it didn't have enough soil, the roots couldn't penetrate the ground to generate nutrients. So it died after a short while. The seed that fell amongst the thorns, it said that it started to grow, the weed and the thorns grew also, and the thorns choked the seeds to death. It couldn't grow because it was growing amongst weeds. But he said, amongst the seeds that fell on good ground. Now this is so beautiful. It says some seeds fell on good ground. Now you would expect that because some of the seed fell on good ground, that the good ground will produce exactly what was put into the soil. You would expect that the harvest would have been much, but it doesn't say that. It says that amongst the ground where we've identified as being good, he said some part of the ground produced 30%. Some part of the ground produced 60%. Some parts of the ground produced 90%, and some produced 100%. Now, here is the beauty of this story. If the farmer, when he went out to sow his seed, when he scattered the seed initially and it fell on rocky ground, if he said, well, this is just bad luck, this is just fate, this is just destiny, it wasn't meant to be, and he goes back home, he's giving up. But the farmer was intelligent. He was wise. He said, well, I've tried once. I don't have to give up. I'm going to try somewhere else. He throws it on the path where the soil is shallow. He didn't give up then. He says, okay, I'm going to try somewhere else. It falls amongst the thorn. He says, great, maybe I might have some hope. Nothing comes true. I'm going to try somewhere else. He was willing to try until. Now, I talk about the word resolve in one of my sessions, and I said, resolve means you decide within yourself that there is no way back. In other words, you burn your boats. You say, I'm going to get this no matter what. I'm going to change the odds. Now, he continued because he was courageous, but because he had a vision. And it simply means to change the odds, you really have to have a strong vision. You have to have a conviction. You have to have faith. Now, what you want will be made possible, not just by your intention, but it will be made possible because the universe will reward your persistence. Now, some of that seed fell on the good soil. You might expect that everything will be fine, but no, life doesn't work that way. Some areas would do well and some wouldn't. And that simply means, and I use this and I've heard this sometime, heard this sometime back, and I've heard it from a number of teachers and a number of books that I've read. And I'll use a good example. Let's say you want to, say, throw free throws. It means that you have to do maybe 100 attempts. Out of the 100 attempts, maybe 10 of those will hit the rim. The rest may not even get close. 10 will hit the rim. You're getting close. Out of the 10 that hit the rim, maybe 3 out of that 10 will probably bounce around and go in. 10 hit the rim, didn't go in. Out of the 100, 10 hit the rim, the others didn't, and goes out. 3 bounce around, and you're thinking, oh shit, is it going to go in? And then it falls in. Out of the 3, maybe one of them that you've thrown might be one of those where it just goes beautifully in. And that simply means to get one beautiful throw, you need to do 100 attempts. It's a beautiful formula. It doesn't work in every case, but you have to understand that that's simply the law of large numbers. It's the law of averages. You do something over and over and over and over and over again, and eventually you get a perfect result. You get a perfect score. So law number 2 is the law of sowing and reaping, meaning you have to scatter your seeds. If you can scatter the seeds, you influence the odds. Now here's what's beautiful. When you get to good soil, the soil is neutral. Soil is like life. The soil says, if you put seed in me, I promise to give you a harvest. The soil does not tell you whether it's going to be a good harvest or a poor harvest. It simply says, I'm going to give you a harvest. There's almost like what's called a covenant. It's a principle, there's a law. A principle is something that cannot be violated. The soil says, I don't care if it's good seed, I don't care if it's bad seed. I'm neutral. All I know is I'm a soil. And if you put seed in me, I'm going to give you something back in return. You're going to get something back. You might get more, you might get less, but you're going to get something. Now, to ensure that you get much more, you have to give me the seed with good intention. You must have faith. You must have expectation. And more importantly, you must be willing to pay the price. And that simply means you can't just put seed in soil and walk away. Now you have the responsibility to nurture the soil. So the harvest depends on what you do after you've actually sown the seed. That also means if you want to change the odds, if you want to bet on odds and you want to change the odds, it's not just the case of attempting one time. It's the attitude you bring to the attempt. It's the focus. It's the intentionality. It's the expectation. And more importantly, it's the sacrifice you're willing to make even when you've paid the price. Most people don't understand that there's a beauty in how life works. Think about this. You walk up to a soil, you put a seed, and you walk away. Now, what if you walked up to the soil, you put a seed, you watered the soil, you nurtured the soil, you removed all the weeds, you came back the next day, you watered the soil, you nurtured it again, you put some maybe fertilizer, you put something to help make it grow better, you came back the next day, and you did that every single day. What are the chances that the soil will give back to you much more than you put in? Well, the odds then go up. So to change the odds, you have to pay a price. The price you have to pay must be paid in full. The price must be paid in advance. Now, you pay the price by commitment, by hard work, by focus, by dedication. In other words, you have to give something up to get something back in return. Now, let's talk about law number 3. And I'll stop with law number 3. And I think it's quite interesting. I'm going to tie this to an area of life where we sometimes find it difficult to understand what's going on. The third law is called the law of compensation. I use this number and this law simply because it's something you and I can measure. The law of compensation applies to everyone, whether you're a student or whether you work. The law of compensation simply says in any area of life that deals with economics, in other words, it deals with return for something you've done. In other words, your return on investment. It says that your compensation will be based on 3 specific criteria. Number 1, the need for what you do. Now, I'm going to use this in a business sense. Let's say you have a job and you're not happy with what you're getting back. You're not happy with your salary. The question is not to wait for a chance. The question is not to wait for a pay rise. The question is not to say, well, destiny, or to say I'm going to pray about it. No. There are laws that have been set up that you can apply to help you achieve anything you want. The law of compensation is one of those, and it simply says the amount of money you get will be in direct proportion to 3 things. Number 1, the need for what you do. Number 2, your ability to do it with excellence. And number 3, the difficulty in replacing you. In other words, how valuable is your talent or your skill? 3 things. The law of compensation is equivalent to what I might call the law of service. It depends on the quality of service you're rendering, you're providing to people. Now, you might say this, well, I'm doing the best job that I can do. I'm working hard. In every area of life, there is such a thing as price and value. Price and value go together. You might say worth. What is something worth? Now, I'm going to use a simple example. The value of something is determined by multiple factors. The price of something is what people are willing to exchange to get it, what they're willing to pay to get it. The value of something is really based on its intrinsic nature, meaning what is it really worth? In many cases, that depends on something called its rarity. How rare is this? Or how expensive is this item? So for example, let's say you're a street sweeper, you sweep streets. That needs and requires some level of skill. To sweep the street, you need to have some level of skill. But in many cases, it's not a really intellectually demanding level of skill. It's not a talent. Anyone can learn how to do it. Therefore, if you're a street sweeper, your compensation compared to someone who's a scientist will be slightly different. Compared to someone who's a dentist, might be slightly different. Depending on the environment, depending on the demand for that particular service, the compensation will vary. So your compensation will be based on the need for what you do. In other words, this talent or this skill you have, is it really needed? Number 2, are you really good at doing it? In other words, are you exceptional? Have you applied mastery to what you do? It's not just a case of working hard. You have to be exceptional. And number 3, how difficult would it be to replace you? Let's use some examples. How difficult would it be to find someone else to sweep the streets? Well, it should be fairly easy. How difficult would it be for you to replace your dentist? Well, you have to find someone else who's gone through the same level of schooling, training, has the same level of experience, and someone who is willing to work in that same environment. So it's a little bit more difficult. How difficult would it be to replace a scientist? You have to go through the same process. So not all skills or talents are equal. They have their own particular function. In order for you to increase your compensation, you can change the odds. You can do that simply because you can improve yourself. And if you improve yourself, automatically you increase your talent. As you increase your talent, the need for what you do increases. As the need for what you do increases, the demand and the willingness to pay more for your time increases. That way you're influencing the odds. So I've given you 3 specific laws that might be helpful in helping you change, helping you reset the odds. Forget about chance, forget about destiny, forget about luck, forget about probabilities in the sense of something outside of you that you can't control. If you're going to use probabilities, bring it closer to you and think about it from the perspective and from the point of view that this is something that you can change. This is something that you can influence. And so in any area of life, this is probably one of the most important questions you should ask. What are the principles? What are the laws that affect success in this particular area? Let's make it more practical. In most areas of life, there are probably maybe a handful of principles, handful of conditions that are needed for success. If you want to make a good dish, we use that as a good example. There are specific ingredients that are needed. You can have everything else, but if you lack 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 ingredients, the taste of the meal is different. At work, professionally, in any job you're doing, if you were starting a job, let's say you're starting a job, it doesn't make sense to say, well, I've studied and I have this experience and I'm therefore bringing my experience to the job. If you have no experience of how the company works, now you may have some experience from what you've done previously. The question you should ask yourself is, and you might even sit down with the person who is your supervisor, you say to them, listen, I want to be successful in this job. What are the 6 or 7 things that I need to do every day to ensure that I actually exceed your expectation and that I amaze my customers and clients? You tell me. The person who is above you might say, that's an intelligent question. You have to do X, Y, and Z. If you do this every day, you'll be adding value, not just to yourself, but to the company. Now, if you focused on doing that, automatically, you're providing more value than you're getting paid for. The problem most people make is that we bring our own idea and perception of how things should be done. I've always found this really fascinating. And I found this fascinating, especially from a perspective of coaching people. Now, this is quite interesting. I want you to think about yourself as I explain my fascination. I enjoy interacting with people. I enjoy coaching where I can, if I have the experience, or if I think I have the knowledge or the understanding to make a difference. And one of the things I found quite interesting is that whenever you meet people who want to be coached, most people, especially if they've exceeded what I call the formative stage of life, meaning they're not young, most adults want you to coach them the way they want to be coached. In other words, they want to tell you how to coach them. But they're the ones who need the coaching. They don't want you to coach them your way. They want you to coach them their way. And I found it fascinating because in many cases I would say, well, why don't you go find someone else to coach you the way you want to be coached? Because if I coach you your way, I'm going to get the same results you're getting. If you want to change your results and you've come to me to help coach you, then you have to follow my way. It's either my way or the highway. Now, that's not an arrogant statement. It's a statement of fact. It simply means that, I'll use this example. This is beautiful. I don't know how true this is, but someone once said that a group of martial artists and I have an interest in martial arts. A group of martial artists came to Bruce Lee and said, "Master, we want to learn everything you know." And so Bruce Lee took them into a dojo. A dojo is a training ground, a place where you've designated for your combat work, for your training. And he said to them, "Well, come in. Let me test you. Let me see what you know." And he takes them through a series of exercises just to understand the level of competence and experience and ability. And then he takes them back into the main studio and he sits down with them and he serves them a drink. He gives them a glass of Coke. And he pours a glass of water for himself. And they have a sip. He has a sip. And they said, "What do you think?" He said, "Well, I've done some assessment. I've just done a very quick analysis of what I think you know, your abilities, and what you need to learn." And he said, "I've come to this conclusion that if you want to know what I know, you must be willing to give up what you know completely to learn what I know." He said, "Listen, another way to think about it is look at your glass. You have Coke in your glass, and I have water in my glass." He says, to have my glass, to have what I have, which is my knowledge and my experience, you have to empty your glass completely so that I can pour mine into yours. He said, because if you don't, if I pour some of mine into yours, all you have is a diluted version of what you already have. In the same way, most people want you to teach them in the same way that they've always done things, which means that they're always going to get the same results. Now, for you to make a change in your life, wherever that might be, always ask yourself the question, what are the few things I need to do to make this successful? In a relationship, what are the few things I need to do to make you happy? Rather than come with your preconceived notions of what the relationship should be like or what the person would need, you just simply say, I want to increase the odds. I don't want to apply chance. I don't want to apply luck. I want to just increase the odds. Let me just ask my partner, let me ask my boss, let me ask my friend, what do you expect of me in a relationship? Powerful. I'm going to come back to this. Now, if you do that at work, what you find is suddenly you're invited, and it's usually an invitation. The person in charge will say, well, I'd like you to do this, and I'd like you to do this, and I'd like you to stop doing this, and I'd like you to stop doing this. They've actually invited you. It's an invitation for you to demonstrate greatness, to demonstrate excellence, mastery. It's what I call, it's a demonstration process on your part. It's an invitation for them to apply favor on you, to show some level of kindness and support. And how you take that instruction determines how well you change or move the odds. I'll conclude with this. In a relationship, whatever kind of